Welcome to Working Dragon Mystic. I'm Drake. I've been getting a lot of questions of late about light energy, dark energy, and why I seem to use the word balance so much in so many of my videos. And actually, very specifically, I had an individual who saw me do a talk at a metaphysical shop at one point. And the subject of that talk was on dragon magic and how there's so heavily a focus on balance. And they quoted me saying that light and dark really won't get you through because you have to focus on that balance. So this week I actually wanted to touch on that topic. First off, when I say light and dark, a lot of people naturally will automatically switch to white or black magic. And I want to clarify right now that when I say light and dark, I don't mean white or black magic, nor do I mean good and evil in any aspect. In fact, my personal view is magic itself is neutral. Magic doesn't have an alignment of good or evil, right or wrong, and any of that. It is energy, and energy can be used to do good, energy can be used to do bad. And when we talk about the left and right hand paths, again, I don't think one is better than the other. I don't think one is more virtuous than the other. I think it's two pathways that ultimately get us to the same results via different directions. It's like driving. You can take multiple roads to get to the same city. So this isn't a moral discussion by any means. And I may actually do a video later on the left and right hand paths and my views on it. But this one is specifically talking about energy. Now, one of the easiest and probably the most common symbol when we talk about light and dark energies is yin and yang. And I really do love that symbol because it is actually a very balanced symbol. In the darkness there is some light, and in the light there is some darkness. You can never completely separate the two. In fact, they define each other. Now, my practice is actually tries to balance out all things in my life. Whether it be work, play, it doesn't matter. I'm always trying to find that balance. And there is even a balance in what some might call selfishness and charity. If you go on any social media right now, you'll probably find some meme or something where somebody's talking about how someone thinks they're being selfish and mean because they're taking time for themselves. They're healing themselves. They're doing some self-work. They're taking the time out to take care of themselves. And the fact that we can look at that and call that selfish, to me, that's a little harsh, because that is something we need. You can't constantly give and give and give until you're just worn out and you've got nothing left, and then you're left miserable. So it's important to know that you have to also take care of yourself. And that's what balance is. And when we talk about light and dark energies, the same concept will come up. Now, first off, let's start with dark. Okay, dark energy at a very simple level would be called yin. And it represents, obviously, dark. It represents night. Of the two, it's definitely the cooler or the colder of the two. It's often even associated with the feminine aspects of the world. Now, if something is hidden, if something's unseen, something's unknown, it's actually going to fall into this particular energy pattern. It's going to fall into the dark because it is hidden. It's unseen. We don't know it yet. In fact, occult is largely considered black magic because it seeks out for those secrets and that knowledge. And for me, that's actually one of the things I love so much about my work, is I'm constantly getting a chance to learn new things. Whether it be through divinations, evocation, invocation, or just experimentation with spell work. There's always something new to learn. Now the funny thing is, the second you find the answer, what was once dark has now been brought to light. So it's no longer hidden to you. It still remains dark to some, but it is still, it starts becoming light to you. And the starts becoming light is important because the more you understand it, the more comfortable you get with it, the more the light shines on it, if you will. And that's, to me, that's a very important concept. Now, the dark also does deal with nocturnal energy sources. So anything under the nocturnal energy source would easily fit into this category. So if you're doing magic during a new moon, any moon magic actually would fall under dark because it does somewhat fall into that night category. The full moon, it can fall into the light because the full moon is one of the largest representations of light at night. But any magic that's done during a nocturnal time is tapping into that dark current in some way. Now again, I say dark, not evil. We're not dealing with good and evil when we use these terms. And I keep reiterating that because so many times when I'm discussing these, when I'm giving a talk, people want to keep reverting back to dark is evil. It's not. The world needs the night as much as it needs the day. You can't get away with one or the other. You have to have both, and they both serve a very beneficial and good purpose. Both can actually be used for good or for bad. It's that simple. So, if dark covers all that, and then light, that's the yang. It deals with the daytime. It deals with all light energy patterns. It deals with the masculine aspects most of the time. And it does deal with the daytime hours of the day. You could even break these energy patterns up to the halves of the year, because we do have a dark half of the year and a light half of the year. And when something is known and something reaches enlightenment, it clearly falls into that light pattern of energy. And both of these energies really help to define each other. So if you look at one, you can really start to understand the opposite of it, because if this one does this, then if its opposite is light or dark, the opposite's clearly this. Now, the yin-yang shows that in the darkness there's still some light, and in the light there's still some darkness. And we see this in the world. Again, at nighttime, no matter how dark it is, there's going to be some semblance of light shining from somewhere. The main concept here when we're looking at light and dark, though, is it's the opposites and how the opposites are important. Now, one thing when we are talking about light, people often associate light with healing. They associate it with joy, happiness. And those things do exist in the light, but they also exist within that darkness. One of the greatest examples of this that I was taught when I was learning was if you were to just have daytime, plants thrive on sunlight, but at the same time, too much sunlight dries them out and they die. It has to cool off. They have to have that ability to cool off, to really focus on gaining moisture and get that rest from the sunlight. So it's that time away from the sun that is a healing process to them. And so you can use those darker currents for healing the same as you can those lighter currents. It's kind of, if you think about hot and cold ointments dealing with pain, the same concept really works here. So there will be times when you need to use a cooler energy to cool off, to heal. And there's times when you're too cold and you need to warm up, and you'd be using lighter energies. Magic works the same way. There are times when the yin energies or the dark energies are far more beneficial than the yang energies. This is really the focus, because the more you understand these currents, the more you look at them, and you understand that both this side and this side have to work together to create the whole. That's really drastically important, and so many people, I feel, lose this. In fact, the biggest argument I see when I'm talking to practitioners is always good witch, bad witch, white magic, black magic, left hand path, right hand path. And they get so caught up in those arguments that they never actually step back to ask, what is the practitioner actually doing with their practice? Because some of the best healers I've met are left-hand practitioners, which if you were to buy into the stereotype, well, those people are evil, they're horrible, they're not going to heal somebody, they're going to curse them. Wrong. And some of the people I've seen do the most harm would actually fall on the right-hand path, which again, that goes against the stereotype. Energy is energy, and it can be used either direction. So, whether you're using light energy or dark energy, the key point is to seek that balance. So, to get more into the magic on this, because I know this has been a convoluted discussion so far. I know a practitioner, he is strictly a nocturnal practitioner. He finds that his joy, his comfort is really in those nocturnal energies. That said, he does study other forms of magic. Those nocturnal magics are just really what he seems to focus on. Now, what I found very interesting when I first met him is what he can manifest using those nocturnal patterns. At night, there was no question that this dude's got his stuff together. At night, he can pull those energy patterns, he can utilize his magic, and he's just going to rock it. What surprised me, though, was one summer we were walking down the sidewalk on Main Street, and it was hot that day, and he had a coat on, and I just felt this sudden influx of nocturnal energy. Well, I asked him what that was, and he said he was hot, so he bent the energy to, climate control, basically turn on his own AC, rather than take his coat off. Well, it was somewhere between noon and 3 o'clock in summer. Where's the nocturnal energy coming from? And I brought that point to him, and he smiled, and he says it's always nocturnal somewhere, somehow. All you need to do is look around. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, the sun casts the light, but the light creates a shadow. Nighttime is the shadow of day, just as day is the shadow of night. Now that was a complicated way of saying that there's always darkness around us. And he was able to pull from those shadows, whether it be from around a tree, a bush, a building, it didn't matter. There's a shadow somewhere for him to pull from, and the energy's the same. He's still pulling from that same font of energy when he does that. And he also smiled and pointed out, if someone was to make it so that there wasn't a shadow nearby him, technically speaking, his coat would be blocking the light from his body, creating a shadow. Whether that's why he wouldn't take his coat off or not, I don't know. I didn't ask. But he stands as a prime example of someone who really does put their focus in those nocturnal dark energies. But he's not limited in his practice by day or night as I once thought he would have been. And he's a tremendous practitioner. I mean, he's actually one of the better healers I know. Anytime I have questions with healing work or I need advice and wisdom, he's somebody I turn to. I really respect him. And he's also one of the most compassionate and giving human beings I've ever met. If a little quirky, but that's okay. And then, I know a lot of practitioners who do focus with just the light. They're very solar oriented in their practices. And I know a few healers that are solar focused, and they do a great job. Many Reiki workers, they easily put themselves in that light worker category, though I don't know if many of them actually consider day or night into that equation. But I've also seen them use Reiki and other energy patterns, not just from a light's perspective, but they've been able to darken it up for other things if need be. One perfect example of this was at a beach one day. We actually had a Reiki worker who, the person was overheated. Medics had been called, and she started to use Reiki to regulate and help balance out the overheating. So she's using it to cool the body down, essentially, which, if you look at yin and yang, that would fall into the darker sides of energy. And what I found fascinating with this particular event was when the EMTs got there, they could actually tell that this person was starting to cool down quicker than they should. And luckily, the EMTs done their job and everything was fine. The person ended up being perfectly okay. So this is an example where you do have a light worker who was able to use that energy current in what would normally be considered a cooler, colder, darker way. Now we're talking healing on both sides of this fence here. Now that being said, I've seen light workers do some of what I would consider the worst curses. They would literally heal somebody just enough to keep them at that point of maximum suffering. And to me, that's evil. That's horrid. And that is definitely coming from a place of light where they're using it. And that's a horrible thing to do to somebody. Not to say that you can't do that using dark energy, because you easily could. Again, if it's doable on one side, it is doable on the other in some way. And because of this, when people ask me, is one better than the other? The answer is no, it's not. However, with all this rambling, that finally we should talk about balance, because that's kind of what kicked off this whole question. So yes, light and dark, in my perspective, and when you look at them from a non-spiritual perspective, just a function of energy, they are two sides of the same coin. Well, balance is that coin. So what I try to do in life and in magic is I try to find that balance. What can I use each energy for most effectively? And this might differ from person to person. Some people will tell you dark energy works better at these things, while light energy works better at these things. After 15 years of working with people and different perspectives, I've actually come to the conclusion that's not the case. Because light energy and dark energy can accomplish the same goals. So technically that puts them both equal. No matter what you're approaching, that makes the energies themselves equal. So what's different? Well, it's the person. It's the person using the energy. It's the person's viewpoint. It's the person's perspective. There are things that I can use darker energy for far more easily than I can lighter energies. Just because of who I am as a person, those perspectives make sense to my subconscious. Therefore, it's far easier for me to focus my will and manifest the results with them. And the inverse applies. There are things that I can use light energy for far more effectively than I can the dark energies. And again, that comes down to who I am as a person. And it works in magic and it works in life. So when we're talking about balance, it's understanding that constant dynamic tilt of energy in your life. Everything's constantly in motion. You can't just get that arrow in the center like you would with a level and expect it to stay there. As soon as you let go, it's going to tip one way or the other. And everything you do is constantly pushing it one way or the other. Back and forth. And being aware of that is how you maintain that balance, because you work, you play. And you have to understand what it is about you. And as practitioners, that's an important thing. We want to have that balance. And like I said, when we're discussing these things, it's not good and evil. Though you could actually view balance in a peace and war concept, because there is the right time and the correct time to fight, and there's the right time and the correct time not to fight. But too much of either one is a bad thing. You can be so passive, it's so peaceful, that you become a doormat and anyone can walk in and take what you have or harm you. But at the same time, you can get so lost in fighting and war that it destroys who you are, and you forget how to enjoy life outside that horrible, horrible concept. I studied martial arts for years. Yes, having the ability to fight, having the ability to defend yourself, and doing so for yourself, your family, and what you believe in is important. But you fight to preserve those things so that you can have that time of peace, that time of enjoyment, that time where you can show compassion for your community, where you can sit back. You can just relax in your yard and grill out. You can go for a walk. But you have to have both of those things in balance for it to work. You can't separate them, and you can't go to one side or the other and just stay there. And magic and energy works the same way. I know some traditions don't really work this way as much as others. That said, I would say most traditions, if you really look at them, balance does come into play. Even if they may not refer to it as light or dark, that balance will come into play a lot in there. So, with all this rambling, let's try and sum it up. The concepts of light and dark are contained in yin and yang really well. So if you want a single thing to look into and research, that's really a good place to do it and to get started. But I'd also meditate on exactly what these two things mean to you. And get an ideal. Take your journal, write down what you feel, what you think, both before and after meditation. And also take the time to ask yourself what balance means to you, because you do actually have to think about that. And these aren't concepts that are written into stone. You have to pursue them and seek some kind of an understanding of them. What is dark or light for one person in many circumstances will differ based on a perspective and who they are and the path they follow. And definitely what is a balanced practice and lifestyle will differ from practitioner and person. So this is a little personal, and that's the reason this video's really been all over the map. I wish I could just give you a list of correspondences like I do with candle colors and say, this is what dark does, this is what light does. But I can't, because they do such a great job of defining each other. You have to really look into both of them and see how they apply to you in your path. Now, obviously, there are some correspondences that are easily tied together. Dark energy, nighttime. Light energy, daytime. Those are pretty direct correspondences you can use. But in my mind, they also feel very vague still yet. So the key thing here I want you to take away is that both the dark and the light work to define each other. And just as they differ, they still both contain the aspects of one another. So neither one is stronger, neither one is weaker. They literally are co-partners, and they exist together. And it's that center point where they're both in perfect harmony. That is what we're seeking when we say balance. So you have to understand what those things are to you in your life. If you're somebody who you have to be outside, then you need to make sure you're getting outside, even if your job is inside. You have to work, you have to make money, fine, but balance it out. Make sure you're getting outside as much as you need to as an individual. Um, Self-care. Do not deny yourself self-care. It's a very important aspect, and you should do it. We have what we're responsible for, yes, but we should also enjoy our life as well. And it's balancing it out. It's very important. And the same concept works in our magic. And that's the reason I try to put more focus on balance than either one of those two. Because if my focus is on balance, I'm naturally keeping these two in play. So I know this video's definitely been a bit weirder compared to some of my others, but that's okay. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're new to the channel, hit subscribe and make sure you click the bell icon so anytime we have a new idea or release a new video, you'll be notified about it. We do try to get at least one video a week up every Tuesday. And please leave a comment below. Give us some of your viewpoints on light and dark. What are some of the correspondences you might associate with them? How they apply to your life? And tell us, what do you do to keep your life in balance? So leave the answers to those questions below. I'm Drake, and this has been Working Dragon Mystic. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.